On the show this week, I wanted to talk about ways to bring people together, so I turned to a friend named Reggie Harris. Stick around. Hey, welcome to Charlie's Open Mic. My name is Charlie Mossbrook. On this week's show, we have Reggie Harris. He is a songwriter, he is an educator, a storyteller. He brings people together in collaborations and just brings people together in general. He's a beautiful man. I'm looking forward to talking to him, so stick around. But first, let's listen to his music.
This is a song that I wrote inspired by a Gaelic saying years ago. The saying is, "In the shelter of each other, the people live." And I wrote the song in the spirit of the spirituals, in call and response. So all you have to do is sing back to me what I sing to you. So let's try that. It goes like this. In the shelter of each other, in the shelter of our lives, we are open, we are hoping, we are dreaming, we are hopeful, we are wise. So let's try that chorus again. I'm going to lean on you a little heavier. Here we go. In the shelter of each other, in the shelter of our lives, we are open, we are dreaming, we are hopeful, we are wise. That chorus will come around again. You know that many times the weight of the world crashes in. We feel angry and afraid. We start to lose our sense of hope, our sense of connection. The isolation we have learned will not bring much in return if we truly cannot learn to live as one. Here we go. Right in the shelter of each other, in the shelter of our lives, we are open, we are dreaming, we are hopeful, we are wise. You know that many times the pain of the world crashes in. We feel broken and betrayed. We start to lose our sense of joy, our sense of direction. And though our history remains, well, it's our actions we must change. If we hope to heal our planet, you know that we must stand. Here, right in the shelter of each other, in the shelter of our lives. Yeah, we are hoping, we are dreaming, we are hopeful, yeah, we are wise. Let's sing together. Right in the shelter each other right in the shelter of our lives. And we are hoping, we are dreaming, we are hopeful, we are wise. Yeah, we are hoping, we are dreaming, we are hopeful, we are wise. We are wise. We are wise.
Welcome to the show, Reggie.
Well, thank you, Charlie. It's great to see you.
Good to see you. I was thinking about this last week and what I wanted to ask you about, and I thought I'd ask you about your first guitar.
I borrowed one from the girlfriend who is responsible for me learning to play the guitar. But when I wanted to buy one, we were actually on a trip to Tennessee, and she said, "You need a guitar." So we went to a flea market, and we found one for like $25. I just remember it had action that was about as high as the Rocky Mountains, and it was a big body thing, and it got me through the first 6 months. And then I thought I really need a guitar I can play. So I went downtown Philadelphia, and I went to 8th Street Music. They had this beautiful Epiphone Sunburst, and I bought that for $125. Boy, I love that guitar. It really stayed with me for a few years until finally I decided I needed a better guitar. And so the next one I bought was a Martin D28, and I had to trade in my beautiful Epiphone to get it.
I'm sure there are people crying all over the country right now.
Well, that Epiphone, I wrote, probably about 10, 12 songs on it. It was just very playable, very encouraging, which obviously for a beginning guitarist is one of the most important things.
You have sort of you do have an interesting story about school growing up.
I was in a school, that sang a lot, and, all of these amazing songs. Second grade, my second grade teacher teaching us Woody Guthrie songs and a Bob Dylan song, Blowin' in the Wind. My introduction to folk music actually came at Grover Cleveland Elementary School. But in my 6th grade year, my mother went to a meeting, and they told them at the meeting that their kids could go up the street to the junior high school 2 blocks up from me, or they could go cross town. They said the magic words, if your children go cross town, they'll be going to a better school. My mother heard that, and she said, well, we're going to get him out of the neighborhood. So it was going to that school, Jay Cook Junior High, that opened the door for yet the next move when my mother went to another parent-teacher meeting, and my history and homeroom teacher in 8th grade said, Miss Harris, I think Reginald, being a very eclectic boy, would do well to go to the school that most of these other kids are going to go to. And she said, oh, is that a better school? Meaning, of course, white kids went there.
Okay.
And he said, oh, yes, it is. And she said, well, can you get him in? And that is the road that opened up music, because I was part of the choir for, 4 years. Some of those kids that I met became my friends and really pointed me in the path of finding folk music in a different way. And I credit my school career, which, in so many ways was really hard because I was always going to school outside of my neighborhood. The neighborhood that I was going to school in was just very different. It was mostly white, heavily Germanic. I ended up having to take German to go there. Many of the kids in my German class spoke German at home. So I was always the outlier. In many ways, high school for me was both a really opening opportunity of seeing the world, and also a very difficult, restrictive environment in which I was always kind of feeling less than. What it did was it really prepared me for living in a world where I'd be traveling constantly between communities to which I did not belong, and helped me to get a sense of what I would have to do to survive in them. So I'm very grateful for that now, but it was really hard in high school.
In the car we listened to a record that, and I know my wife has shared this with her students, that you and Kim produced about the Underground Railroad. How did you both get into teaching that?
Well, it happened because of folk music. We were, just beginning our career, and we were looking for places to play. And actually, at the time, we were in the Midwest a lot, and we were traveling around and playing colleges mostly in those years. We were performing at colleges, and but there were always things that we were trying to find more work. And we got a call from somebody at the Philadelphia Folk Song Society. We were living in Philly at the time, and they had a program called the Odyssey of Folk Music. And the deal was that they were looking to send musicians and artists into the schools to talk about some way that music had made a difference in history or in culture. And Kim had remembered a program that was back in her 5th grade year, when a guy came into the school and talked about African American history. And along the way, he talked about the Underground Railroad and how music had played a part. And so she said, well, we have this opportunity to go into schools. Why don't we do it on the Underground Railroad? And we didn't know anything about the Underground Railroad. Most people didn't. And so we did a little research and found out that spirituals were often sung as secret code songs. So we put together a little half-hour program, and the Folk Song Society hired us and sent us into 5 schools. And we were all prepared to wait until the next year to do 5 more schools. But one of the colleges we were playing said, so you do anything else? I mean, besides concerts? And we said, well, yeah, we have this little program we're doing on history and music and the Underground Railroad. And they said, oh, what's that about? And we did that. Some other colleges hired us. And then we got hooked up with an agent who got us into the Kennedy Center for a week of programs on the Underground Railroad, which connected us to the Kennedy Center Education Office. And they had us come in and do a 3-hour workshop that we had to put together with one of their people. And wow, all of a sudden we had teachers writing us and saying, hey, can you come to our school and do this? It's just such a remarkable thing to go into a school and talk about a time in history like that, particularly the Underground Railroad, which was people from different races, different colors, different religions, different backgrounds coming together to figure out a way to take on the issue of slavery. You can lift all those songs, particularly the spirituals and the freedom songs, out of that, connected directly to curriculum, and watch the kids' eyes just kind of open up.
What would be a good example of lyrics found in some of the spirituals?
Well, one of the classics is Wade in the Water, which, was lifted because African Americans heard the story of Jews in Egypt and their, being in slavery. And so they fashioned that song to talk about Moses, who was leading his people to freedom. They used verses that reminded them in code to stay near fresh water or get fresh water when they could, to cover their tracks by walking through the water, wade in the water. Mm-hmm. And they're calling up the story of Moses and the Red Sea. So there are several different layers of coding, and they're all disguised as just a song that's singing about some Bible story. Mm-hmm. Steal Away to Jesus is another. You're singing Steal Away, and the master says, oh, they're singing about going to heaven. And you say, yeah, well, heaven was a secret code word for a place where you could be free, like Canada.
Speaking of your collaborations, like the ones with Kim, you've got a few other collaborations. One that I've had the opportunity to witness that was really moving, Greg Greenway.
The message that Greg and I have been tied into for over 35 years. I met him actually through one of Sonny Oaks' Phil Oaks Song Nights. We were on a song night in New York City, and Greg and I were sitting in the green room. We're both sports fans, so we were probably talking sports. But somewhere along the line, we talked about Phil and his amazing ability to talk about, racial issues and anti-war and politics. And soon we were talking about race. And I thought, wow, a white, male performer in that time who was not only willing to talk about race, but who had obviously studied a lot about it and read about it and lived and experienced growing up in Richmond, Virginia, as he says, the capital of the Confederacy and one of the centers of white supremacy. And from a very early age, in hearing people like Eric Anderson and Richie Havens, mm-hmm. He'd heard messages that really spoke to him and set him on a journey to kind of look at race in America. So over the course of years, we've just had these conversations, and we've collaborated on songs and on songs that he had written about Rosa Parks and Mandela and John Lewis. Mm-hmm. And 5 years ago, we were having another conversation, and both of our lives had kind of shifted. We had some creative time to do something. And we both took a trip to Louisiana together. and went to the Whitney slave plantation. And we had an experience that hatched a show deeper than the skin, because we just felt that our particular stories, born 3 days apart, he born in the South and me in the North, but having those roots around Virginia, we thought we had something to say to the country and the world, particularly our country, in talking about the different narratives that blacks and whites come through, using our friendship as a meter to show that we can talk about these things and we can discover things in our own stories that help us to make connections. So it's been a remarkable journey and a remarkable presentation to do. It keeps growing and evolving. Even in the this protocol, we've been able to do it on Zoom, and able to keep spreading the message.
Tell me more about storytelling as a songwriter.
In folk music circles, I suppose I would be known as a singer who has really long intros. And in the storytelling community, I would probably be known as a storyteller of depth that often ends in song. So the truth of my relationship to story lies kind of between those two things. When I was working with Kim, when we were doing school shows, we actually found storytelling to be effective early on when we played schools, because story is so integral to the way human beings are wired. And I remember that the start actually was on a Friday afternoon somewhere in North Carolina. We were playing a middle school, and the kids were just done. They were just ready to go home and have a weekend. And I remember that we were just pulling out all the stops that we could with songs and getting them to do motions and all this stuff. And then we just kind of launched into a story. I think it was about Harriet Tubman, or it might have been the story The People Could Fly. Whatever it was, we just kind of looked at each other and said, what else can we do? And we just instinctively launched into telling this story. And we used to tell stories, back and forth. And the auditorium got quiet, and the kids leaned forward, and we went, aha. And so we started to expand on that, and we just found that there were so many things that you can tell people in a story that sometimes even a song doesn't really connect, just because of the way it draws people in. I love story, and I didn't realize that growing up, but I find such amazing ability to connect. I find that in the middle of a concert, there are so many fascinating stories in history that people don't know. It's one thing if you're standing up in front of a group and you want to talk about maybe Satchel Paige, and you say Satchel Paige was a pitcher who, played in the Negro Leagues, and he was this and blah, blah, blah. But to wind into a story and say, on a Wednesday afternoon, a little boy went down to the local playground, and there was a team playing there. And you wind into the story, and they lean in. And now you get to paint the picture of a time and a place.
You have been an advocate for unity for a long time. Tell us where you see we are as a people, and where you'd like to see us go, and how we can get there.
My experience of growing up as an African-American male in Philadelphia, and my travels throughout the nation, and many of the people that I have had the privilege of knowing or observing, all those elders that I grew up watching in my community and in my church, and then of course people like Pete Seeger and Tochi Seeger and Tom Paxton and Richie Havens and John Lewis and just so many of the folks who have been working at trying to find a way to convince people in this nation that unity is important, and to come to an understanding of how difficult that has been. Not because I think people don't want to be unified, or they don't want their neighbors, or maybe even people in other states or around the world to have a good life, but the systems in the world that divide us are very, very dedicated to making sure we stay divided. This is not a mistake that we are divided. In America, it happened very early on in the 1700s. The powers that be decided that it was best if blacks, poor whites, Native Americans were at each other's throats. Then they would be able to do what they wanted to do. And people don't want to believe that. but it's all in black and white. It's all documented. So we're working against a frame that is very powerful. And, I think on the frame of things when they're faced, most people will try to be fair and definitively try to be their best self, their better angel, as Abraham Lincoln would call it. But the fact of the matter is that we are encouraged in so many ways not to be, and to not trust people who don't look like us, don't act like us, don't love the same kind of people that we love. And so this is the struggle, and I think the election, however it comes out, has shown how deep that divide is and how passionately our political leaders are trying to make sure that the message they send us is that you can't trust the other. So this is what we're working against, and those of us who have been preaching unity and talking about diversity and the benefits of it understand that it's a hard, long road. And a lot of the songs that I write certainly are aimed at that. When people hear them, it resonates with them. But it's difficult to resist that message of hate and of division when it's coming at you 24 hours a day. Today, as I sit here and I look at a country that is really struggling to make choices based on principle and integrity and fairness and truth, I see people buying into things that are simply not even fantasy. It's a nightmare. And I just today recommit myself to being resilient and to staying on message. And I woke up this morning and I knew that we were, in a quandary as to which direction our fellow Americans were choosing. And I found myself in a remarkably calm place because I'm not surprised by this. This is not something that I didn't expect. I was hopeful that people would say, 4 years of hate and division is enough. Let's do something different. But people get scared, and they don't live near, people who, they are told that they need to fear, so they don't have an everyday experience of them. And they don't have an everyday experience that, those people are still just like them, trying to stay healthy and keep their families fed and housed. And as, Bernice Johnson Reagan and Sweet Honey sang, "We who believe in freedom will not rest until it comes." I wrote a song, in this pandemic time, that we will not rest until the storm is over. We will not lay this burden down. We will keep each other strong. We will love. We will carry on till we stand all together on solid ground. That's my message. It has been my message. It will be my message.
If you appreciate this content, please consider subscribing to the channel. Please ring the bell for notifications of upcoming episodes. Always click like and comment down below, and you can find us at charliesopenmic.com, where you can find our Patreon link to help support the show. And I know it's not the world you thought that it was gonna be. It's not always fair, it's not easy, believe me, I've been there. Well, and I wish that I could save you from these struggles and these fears and all of these tears that you held back and carried through the years. And she said, well, it's alright, all got a work to do, and in the middle of the night, once we are through, I'm gonna hold you tightly and wrap you in these arms until the lights come shining through. Sometimes the movie never ends, and you cannot find your friends. Well, and the winds are barely breezy, and change has stalled for you again. Well, and you cannot slow your mind. Well, and the stillness has no end. Well, Well, and your thoughts just keep on racing, but what you're chasing, it seems pretend. She said, well, it's alright, we've all got a work to do, and in the middle of the night, once we are through, I'm gonna hold you tightly and wrap you in these arms until the light it comes shining through. Well, and I know it's not the world you thought that it was gonna be. It's not always fair, it's not easy, believe me, I've been there. Well, and I wish that I could save you from these struggles and these fears and all of these tears that you held back to carry through the years. And she said, well, it's alright, all got a work to do, and in the middle of the night, once we are through, I'm gonna hold you tightly and wrap you in these arms until the light it comes shining through. Thank you for watching Charlie's Open Mic this week, and thank you to Reggie Harris for sitting down and sharing his story, his song, and his vision with us. As always, please hit that subscription link down below. Please ring the bell for notifications of upcoming episodes, and you can always find us at charliesopenmic.com, where you can find our Patreon link to help support the show. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.